Olin, and salutations once again, yet again, to the truth core, whoever and wherever you may be on the planet. I'm here again on June 11th, 2021, with a talk on the subject of the ultimate feat of predictive programming. And I'm going to tell you at the outset that you already know what that is. You have already heard in the course of your life, thousands of times, the single word that defines the ultimate feat of predictive programming. So all I can do is elaborate on what you already know, possibly educate you and elicit from your innate knowledge a better grasp of what you already know, and point you to the obvious. I can't say exactly when it was that the term predictive programming came into wide expression in public discourse, but it's been some years now, and probably it was used before 9/11, but certainly it came into use extensively after 9/11 due to the fact that there were many instances of predictive programming of 9/11. For instance, clips in The Simpsons, and also a TV movie that depicted the events of 9/11 exactly as they occurred some months later. So I don't have to elaborate on instances of predictive programming. I'm sure that most, if not all of you, are quite aware of this phenomenon. However, in the view of predictive programming today, the investigators who have exposed it have cited instances from the popular media, such as films and television. So there are many instances of predictive programming in movies and in television, in advertising, and many other aspects of mainstream media. So I'm here today to say something that perhaps hasn't been said before. It's simply an observation that an educated scholar could make. And it goes like this. The history of predictive programming that leads up to today, to the year 2021, and to the events that are culminating right here, right now, goes back at least 2,000 years or more. And it goes back to the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I don't know exactly the dating. I can't remember. It's somewhere not in his image. What is the dating of the parchments and documents from the Dead Sea caves near Qumran, which was the outpost of one of the outposts in the ancient Middle East of the Zadokime sect of the ultra-righteous. The authors of those documents recorded them on different media, sheepskin, I believe, papyrus. There is the famous copper scroll from Qumran. And I'm guessing that they have all more or less been dated to the dawn of the so-called Piscean age. That is the age when the vernal point, the location of the sun at the spring equinox each year, shifted from the constellation of the Ram, called Aries in astrological jargon, to the constellation of the Fishes. Well, I have dated that event closely to 120 BCE, 120 years before the inception of the Christian calendar. But if you want to give it a little margin, you can say between 180 and 120 BCE. And those dates correspond to significant historical events, most important of all being the Maccabean revolt in Palestine. So the Maccabean revolt was an event of insurgency against the Roman Empire directed by the Zadokim cult, who at that moment in time wanted to overcome the power of the Roman Empire in that particular part of the world and establish a Jewish theocracy, if you'll pardon my language. All of that is well known, massively documented, and all conventional academics and scholars of ancient religion, and in particular scholars of Hebrew religion, confirm those events. They all refer to those events for which there is ample evidence. I bring your attention to those documents in the heritage of that religion, which is unique to that ethnic group, and unique in the world, in fact, written in a Semitic language. I refer you to the tradition preceding the revolt of the Maccabees, which is called the prophetic legacy of that particular religion. So you have the prophecies and visions of Daniel, of Ezekiel, and others. Now, it is a fact that there is an extensive field of alternative research that has investigated these biblical documents and interpreted them in the framework of the ET UFO phenomenon. That genre is called biblical ufology. I mentioned in the previous talk that I read 120 or so books on the UFO phenomenon previous to writing Not in His Image. And I would say that probably 8 or 10 of those books were specifically dedicated to biblical ufology. Now, one of the most famous books in the genre was Chariots of the Gods by Erich von Däniken. And in von Däniken's script, he postulated that humanity on Earth had been visited by extraterrestrials in previous times, and the record of these visits was contained in many ancient documents, not only the Sumerian cuneiform materials, but also the documents of the Old Testament, the books of Ezekiel, Daniel, and so forth. So although von Däniken was not specifically in the genre of biblical ufology, his work interfaces with the works in that genre. I can tell you with confidence that the master document of biblical ufology is the War Scroll from the Dead Sea. Now, I cited that scroll in Not in His Image, and I referred to it in my previous talk on the Gnostic expose of ET-EFO disclosure, as it's called. I'll take just a moment to reiterate the main proposition or takeaway of that talk. I said that there are 2 general narratives of alien intervention. In one, the aliens are an advanced civilization with benevolent intentions toward humanity and the earth. In the other, they are malevolent. They have the motive to attack the earth with their superior weaponry and to destroy humanity, or perhaps enslave humanity, a combination of the two. The second narrative assumes that they have the technology to destroy humanity, and that technology has already been previewed in the events of history in the 21st century on 9/11. directed energy weapons, which are, without question, the most advanced destructive weapons in possession of the human races. And that is a proven fact. Whereas, just as a footnote, I might add that the narrative about atomic energy is deceitful. So there really is no such thing as atomic energy. There really never were atomic bombs as such. That claim has been effectively debunked by a number of people. But you can't debunk DEWs. The evidence was there in a scene in downtown New York in the destruction of not 2 only, not 3 only, but 7 buildings. And the abnormal effects of that destruction and of the weapons used has been extensively documented by Dr. Judy Wood and others. Once again, I invite you to think carefully about what I'm saying. I'm introducing a novel plot factor that has not been incorporated in either of those 2 scenarios. Assuming the second, malevolent intent and capacity to attack and destroy humanity, assuming that plot, there is an excluded element. Gnostics warned that the accomplices to the hostile alien ETs are already present among us. In one sense, you could say the Earth has already been invaded by ETs. Specifically, that racial vector, that's the correct term, that carries the archontic infection, going back to the encounter between Melchizedek and Abraham, that racial vector is the presence of the alien archontic exobiological species on the Earth. And they've been here for almost 4,000 years. And the particular modus operandi of the group that carries the archontic infection is twofold. In the first place, they operate as remote control zombies directed by the archons who are outside of the Earth. And secondly, through their ideology of race supremacy, they implement a program over many centuries to subvert, pervert, and disempower all the other races on the Earth in preparation for the final triumph of the alien predators. You can call them predators. They're not predators like the cheetah or the falcon or the owl, raptors, birds who prey on rodents. They are parasitical predators of a specific and unique type for which there exists no equivalent or counterpart in nature due to the fact that they come from outside the atmosphere. They are an exobiological species described in great detail in the Gnostic writings. So it's one thing to say that these hostile aliens are going to attack the Earth and they have the hardware to do it. It's another thing to say that they are not alone. You know the old term, well, we are not alone. There are other civilizations and other species in the universe. Undoubtedly there are. But the archons are not alone. They have their human accomplices, seemingly human. Fact is that the racial vector who received the archonic infection became, in the course of centuries, through their inbreeding, less and less human. And it's also a fact that some of the leading ideologues of the Zadokim program openly announce that they are alien. They add the twist that they are an alien superspecies. Why do they think they're an alien superspecies? How can they come out openly and even say that? That happens due to the fact that their neuronal circuits have been captured by the alien mind force of the archons. And so they are in fact alien to us. They are alien to all the other races. They are exactly what they say they are, an alien master race. At least that's what they would like to ultimately prove that they are. We are living today in the moments after the solar eclipse of June 10th, at that exact moment in history, unlike any other, when they are poised to prove that. But they have predictively programmed the ultimate act of their game over many, many centuries until now. It took many centuries to infiltrate and undermine and confuse human intelligence to the point where they could pull off their final act, their end game. And that moment is now. No need to wait. You are living in that moment right now. So what is the name? What is that one word? The perfect and complete label for the ultimate feat of predictive programming? Apocalypse. The apocalypse of the Zadokim has been predictively programmed for over 2,000 years. And the master script is the war scroll from Qumran. That is an irrefutable fact. The evidence is there. You can investigate it yourself. But I do advise you to read those chapters in the first part of Not in His Image, where I lay all of that out in a cogent way. That is to say, as concisely as I can. Having said that, let's return to the event of the moment. What's happening now and what's been brewing over the last couple of months in the global media? Well, I would say that the plot is boiling over. And the plot is the plot of an ultimate alien attack. So the Dead Sea Scrolls, particularly the Thanksgiving hymn, describe this attack. It was anticipated. But the beauty and power of the Gnostic intel warns you, it gives you a preemptive warning of the nature of this attack and how to face it when it happens. When I sit here and tell you about the Gnostic intel, I'm doing two things at once. I do my best to rely on what I know about the primary sources. So I'm not inventing out of nothing. But at the same time, I do draw inferences that are not substantially present in the primary sources. I draw inferences from what I find in the ancient record. And here is my leading influence. It's the most important thing I have to say to the world on this day and in the days to come, as the acceleration of these events reaches a screaming pitch. If the scenario of an alien attack using the accomplices of the Zadokim in our midst is to occur, it can only occur as a false flag event. There is no actual threat of archonic air power and archonic weaponry. How can I say that? How can I be so confident about that? I base that assertion on what I know as a man who practices the living Gnosis today. So I don't just rely on what the Gnostics left us, what they taught us, which was unique and incomparable, but also rely on using their method, the telestic trance, to advance my own knowledge of what is happening in the cosmos. In doing so, I proceed really carefully, because I know that I'm open to the charge of fantasy. I'm inventing it, I just made it up. That's for you to decide. All I can tell you is that I report on the authenticity of my actual experiences in Gnosis. In writing and talking over a good many years about the ET UFO phenomena, I've made this point. It's my conclusion that the vast majority, say 95%, whatever, of UFO sightings of hardware, flying vehicles, are actually human-made vehicles. So we're looking at the technology of stealth weapons, supersonic jets, things of that sort. There's no doubt in my mind that the military cabal around the world, and it's all one cabal, although it appears to come from different countries, it's all one cabal, that they have developed these craft. There's no doubt about that. And so I hold by the view that the three-letter agencies launched the UFO myth in 1947 to cover up what they were doing. And it was extremely convenient, because then they could fly their planes, their rockets, whatever they have, without fear of them being detected, because if they were detected, they could just pass it off as an unexplained flying object, you see? So the UFO story has served as an excellent cover story all through the years. At the same time, I have asserted the possibility, the plausibility, that the archons who inhabit the solar system, they're not from another galaxy, not from another planet, do have the capacity to construct those kind of vehicles. And I hold to the view that from time to time they may have penetrated momentarily into the atmosphere of the Earth in the past. And I think that there are records, certain records of ancient accounts of UFO sightings that might fall convincingly into that category. But why do I say now that they can't do that they can't penetrate the airspace of the planet, and they can't attack? How can I make such a categorical statement if I do allow that in the past they were able to make forays into the atmosphere? Well, it's simple. I make that assertion drawing from my direct experience of Gnosis using the Gnostic method, which is rigorous. It's a method of noetic investigation. In order to use that method or technique accurately and sanely, you have to know some things about the way the human mind is designed. You have to know how to make the distinction between what the ancient alchemists called the true and the fantastic imagination. And you have to be able to access that information in an altered state, and then come back to the world and confirm it by rational and empirical follow-up, which is what I have done. And I have reported all of that openly and extensively for years. For instance, I determined by that method of investigation that the archons, ET aliens who inhabit the solar system, have a Mercury and silicon constitution, that they resemble a prematurely born fetus, the alien greys, large head, bug eyes, spindly limbs. They do not breathe. In fact, oxygen is toxic to them. It's one reason why they can't remain in the atmosphere for more than a brief period of time. Also maintain that they have no sense organs comparable to that of a living animal. So behind the black lids or the black eyes of the gray ETs, there are radio wave receptors. They do not have eyes. They do not have the organic structure of eyeballs as humans and animals have, and even insects, which have an organic structure with a retina and the optical nerves and the cones that constitute the apparatus of vision. They don't have that. The black eyes of the gray aliens are simply plastic screens that conceal behind that the inner apparatus, which is a radio wave detection mechanism. So they operate using shortwave or microwave radio frequencies. That fact, that assertion, brings up the point of their ability to navigate and their ability to penetrate the atmosphere of the Earth. What happens to their aircraft, or what happened to it in the past, when they were able to pass the orbit of the moon, which was very difficult to do, and come into close proximity of the atmosphere and penetrate the atmosphere momentarily? They literally bounced off the atmosphere because the telluric force of the Earth, the whole entire field of telluric forces, is such that it repels these microwave frequencies. How so? These microwave frequencies used by the Archon ETs are alien to the Earth, and they are repelled by the telluric microwave frequencies of the Earth itself. So in Planetary Tantra, you learn that the living Earth emanates a field or spectrum of 16 discrete frequencies that are below 24 hertz. And we as living animals respond and operate subliminally on those frequencies. And the Divine Mother, the Aeonic Mother, Sophia, communicates to us on those frequencies, which provide a medium for both receiving her transmissions and transmitting to her. All of that is part of the magnificent dynamic of the energetic spectrum of the Earth. And because it has its own integrity, it repels the alien microwave frequencies. But hold on, it gets better. Between March 2011 and March 2014, I conducted something called the Gaian Navigation experiment, and many people around the world participated in that during those 3 years, and many people since then have become aware of the significance of this experiment. What I did in those 3 years was to meticulously track the intelligence and intentions of the living Earth to reset this experiment to its initial ideal conditions and to ultimately overcome the archonic intrusion, which is the anomaly from which this experiment on Earth with the human species and the spectrum of races has suffered due to events that are described in the fallen goddess scenario. So Sophia's correction began in March 2014 after a 3-year reset process. And I've documented this in over 140 talks and thousands of pages of text. If you would care to learn about that experiment and share with those today who are pursuing it, following the developments that have unfolded since reset, you'll find it on Nematta in Vocation 15 on the Gaian Navigation experiment. So, that was completed in March of 2014. A few months later, about a second of her time, which is 108 days of your time, come to the first week in August. And during that week, and in the ensuing weeks, I was living in Andalusia in southern Spain, in a locale that was ideal for doing telepathic practices, or it can be called Gnostic-oriented shamanism. And in August and September, I detected something extraordinary due to the fact that I can read those telluric frequencies in that 16-band spectrum, and so can others as well. I detected that for a period of 25 days, I think it was, there was a emission of UTI, which is unpulsed telluric infrasound. Then there was a 5-day break, and going into September, there was another 18-day blast of UTI. So I detected these two events, because that's what I can do. And, of course, I wondered, what was all that about? And it turned out that not long afterwards, in early November, reports appeared in the media that astrophysicists and atmospheric scientists had detected a completely bizarre event. They had detected that there was some kind of protective shield around the Earth that had never before been detected by any of their instruments. It just appeared. And it seems to, according to their report, seems to have been established at a mean altitude of about 600 miles above ground level. So according to their reports, this is not me now, this is the experts, since September of 2014, there has been a vast protective shell surrounding the Earth. So when I heard that information, I put 2 and 2 together, and I concluded that that was the effect of those 2 blasts of UTI, which is a really unique manifestation of the ground power of the Aeonic Mother, unpulsed. In other words, for the first 25 days and for the remaining 18 days, that emission was unpulsed. It did not modulate. It was one continuous, unmodulated blast. Well, what do I conclude now? I conclude that due to the Aeonic Mother having established that shield, it is not only impossible for the archonic aliens operating in the solar system at large to beam and broadcast their microwave interference into the minds of people on Earth, but it's equally impossible for them ever again to penetrate the atmosphere of the Earth. In order to do so, they would have to operate their telemetric devices. Telemetry is essential to all spacecraft. They would have to operate their telemetric devices in a stable and consistent way so that they could maneuver with their vehicles. But with that shield having been established, were they to come within a range any closer than 600 miles to the Earth, they wouldn't be able to operate their vehicles. The same situation applies to the telemetry of satellites. There are all these satellites circulating the Earth. But at any given moment, with one flick of a mouse, if the telemetry that supports those satellites and controls and guides their motion was disabled, they would instantly fall out of the sky. So I maintain that it is impossible for alien ETs, archonic ETs, even though they may have their own kind of sophisticated hardware, they may have their shining vehicles, they cannot use them to attack the Earth, nor can they use their microwave frequencies to attack the minds of people on Earth. Now, if that is true, you can infer from that from September of 2014 onwards, 7 years ago, the accomplices to the Archons who are on the planet with us are scrambling to complete their program. They're desperate. They no longer have the backup of the microwave emissions from the planetary outpost of the Archons, which is Saturn. So that broadcast system, which has supported them for centuries, is down. It has been disabled. It follows then that all they can do is marshal their own microwave technologies to the utmost ability, to the utmost effect at this time, and try to pull off their final act, which is the apocalypse of a UFO invasion. So, I stand by the point I made in my previous talk. That apocalypse could happen. But were it to happen, were they to pull it off or attempt to pull it off in the immediate future, those who have the Gnostic intel know that it can only be a false flag attack, and that the sources of it, the agents of orchestration for it, are the aliens in our midst already, who have been there in our midst, been here for centuries, and they have used biblical prophecy and apocalyptic literature to predictively program this ultimate event. That's about all I have to say in this talk. And of course, if you like what I say, if you consider it rational, which it is, and if you consider the scenario I'm presenting to be a plausible one that can be proven, well, you're probably wondering, what the fuck can anyone do about it? What kind of counter-offense is possible? You know, it's not just enough to know this, although it is essential to know this. I presume that you see what I mean. The Gnostic intel is the essential orientation to the end game of the Archons and their human proxies, the Zadok, that is to say, the racial vector of the Zedekim and all of their non-racial accomplices, well, that's the enemy. That is the great and paramount enemy. They have the advantage that they are alien to human nature. They are hateful and destructive to a degree that is inconceivable to the ordinary human being, because we just don't have it in us. Not on that scale. Not to that intensity. So what can anyone do about it? Given that you have this intel now, what can you do to counteract the apocalypse of the UFO attack? Due to be announced in one way or another through deceit and misinformation and disinformation in the immediate future. Well, as your friendly neighborhood Gnostic, I'm on the case, and I'll see what I can say about it in the days and weeks to come. Enough said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty to come.